Hello everyone. In this lecture we will be learning about display property in CSS. Remember we learnt about block and inline elements in our previous lectures. All heading elements, paragraph element, div element, all these are block elements. Which means these elements will occupy the entire line width. Right? Whereas span elements and formatting elements, they are all inline elements. Which means they do not occupy the entire line width and will appear inline. Now coming to display property. Display property in CSS is used to convert the block element to inline element and inline to block element. Okay, display property is used to convert block to inline element and inline to block element. So let's look at it with an example. I am in line number 15. So let's create a heading tag h1 with some content. So I'm writing heading element, and below that I'm going to create a span element. Okay, so we have a heading element and a span element. You know, heading element is a block element and span is an inline element, right? So now let's go to the output and explore this using developer tools. Okay, here is our output. Let me open developer tools. And here is the heading element and here is the span element. So I'm highlighting the heading element. See, for heading element, we can see that by default display property is set to block. See here, the display property is set to block for heading element because it's a block element. All HTML elements by default are inline elements. For block elements, the display property will be set to block to make them as a block element. And because of that, this heading element h1 that I am highlighting here, it has display set to block. And here the span element, this is not a block element and it's by default inline element. So no property is set for the span element. Now we are going to make h1 as inline element using display property. So in CSS, we have to set the display property to inline for the h1 element. So let's go back to the Sublime Text Editor. And I'm in line number 9 inside the internal CSS. I'm going to use h1 element selector and use display property display inline. So let's save and go and check the output. Now the text heading element and the text span appears in the same line, right? We have made h1 to inline element using display property. Similarly, we can convert an inline element to a block element. So let's go back to the Sublime Text Editor. Here I am going to use span element selector and going to set display to block. Here the output is now the heading element is made as inline element and span is appearing next because both are inline elements. So both are appearing next to one another. Now we have made span to block element. So let's refresh. Now you can see span is appearing in the next line. So when I highlight on span, we can see this display block. When I take out this setting, it is coming next to heading element. When I enable, it is going to the next line, right? This is how we convert a block element to inline element and inline to a block element. Display property takes two more values. So we have seen block and inline values, right? So other than that, it takes two more values. So it takes value none and inline block. So let me add a comment here and display property takes value block, inline block and none. Okay, here display. So in line number 18, I have added in the comment here. You can see display property takes four values: block, inline block and none. So we have seen block and inline, and now we are going to see what is none. What is the purpose of none value for display property? If we want to hide an element for some reason, then we use display none. Let's hide the span element by setting its display to none. So I'm going to erase this and set the display to none for span element. So let's save this and go to the output. Here we don't see the span element, right? Here the span element is in the code, the developer tools, but when I click on it, you can see the display is set to none. So when I uncheck this, we can see the span element. So display none property is used to hide an element for some reason. Next is inline block. Inline block means the element will get the benefit of both block and inline element. Now in line number 10, we have made the H1 element to inline, right? For inline element, we cannot set height width properties. So let's go to the developer tools. Here I am highlighting this H1. So let's try to give some background color for this H1. We have given a background color for the heading element. Now let's add some width and height. So I'm giving width of 100 pixels. But can you see this one is grayed out? So and there is some note here. See what it is saying is display inline property prevents width from having an effect. Okay, so what does it mean? We cannot set width and height properties for inline elements. So that means if we make H1 element as inline, then we cannot set width and height properties for H1. So, but if we want to make H1 inline, but also we want to set width and height properties, then we have to make it as inline block instead of inline. So let's change inline to inline block, and for the span element I am going to remove the display none. Okay, and now H1 is the inline block element. Now we'll check the output. See, now we have the heading element and span in the same line, and now H1 element is an inline block element. So we can set some width and height properties. So let me make width 400 pixels and background color some color. See, we are able to set the width and height properties since it's an inline block element, and we are also able to display the text inline and not the next line. This display property will be very useful to convert a block element to inline element, or inline to block, or make an element as an inline block. We can also use this display property to create navigation headers. After this lecture, we have an assignment to create a navigation header using display property. Let me give you some ideas for doing that assignment. See here, this is the header that you are supposed to create in the assignment. So for creating this header, you can use unordered list, that is ULLI tags, to create list items like home, shop, about, contact. So you can create all those items using unordered list. Remember unordered list, in unordered list, UL and LI elements are block elements, and that's why it is occupying separate line space, right? We have seen unordered list, right? If we use unordered list, all the list items will take separate line space and they will have a bullet because it's an unordered list. So if you use unordered list for creating this navigation header, then first thing you have to remember is you have to remove the bullets. You can Google on how to remove the bullets, or I'll also give you the property. It's list style type. List hyphen style hyphen type. So I am writing it in line number 11. List style type and set it to none. List style type, set it to none. So this will remove the bullets. It should be UL list style type set to none. So first thing you have to do is to remove bullets by using list style type property, and then you have to make the menu items appear next to one another in the same line. You know how to do that, right? Just now we saw display property. So you can use display inline block You can also use display inline to make the items appear next to each other. But you know that we cannot change width and height properties. Like if we use display inline, so it's better to use inline block so that you can adjust the width and height properties of the menu items. And then you can use padding property to give some spacing around each item. And you can use some background color, and you can style however you want. And one more thing. To align the menu items, you have to use text align property. In this output, we have the menu items on the rightmost end. So you can use text align property for the UL element selector, and then you can either place your menu items in the center or on the left or on the right. So let me go to the developer tools. So here this UL element is highlighted and we have text aligned to right. So let me make it to center. So this will make the navigation menu items in the center. So you can use the UL element and move the items to left, right or center. And you can use other CSS styling properties like font color, background color to style the navigation menu. Okay, hope you are clear with this. Try to do the assignment by yourself and you can compare your assignment code with the solution. If you have any queries, you can reach me in my email. I think you know my email. It's in the course description. So, in the next lecture, we will look at position property in CSS. Thank you.